Hi everyone, this is Rhiannon Payne, Marketing Director at Ruby Central, and I'm here today with Irina Nazarova, CEO of Evil Martians, which is one of the leading development studios in the Ruby and Rails ecosystem. Irina is also the host of SF Ruby, which is an incredible monthly meetup here in San Francisco that I've been lucky enough to attend for over a year now. And Irina just announced that she is turning SF Ruby into more than just a meetup. It is now going to be a large-scale Ruby conference at the end of this year, November 19th through 20th, here in San Francisco at Four Masons. So really excited for that. Really excited to chat with Irina today and to also have her speaking at RailsConf this summer in Philly for the final RailsConf. Thank you, Irina, for being here. It's great to have you.
Yay, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited. Thank you for this intro. It's amazing. There are many things to be excited about, and I share this feeling with you for sure.
Absolutely. There's so much life and energy in this space right now. And I think part of that is because of you and all the work you've been doing here in San Francisco over the past almost 2 years now since moving here. We really didn't have any San Francisco Ruby meetups for the longest time until you brought them back to life. The work that you're doing has made a big impact.
That's very generous. And folks, this is really how it feels to be doing things in San Francisco, in the Ruby community in San Francisco. I constantly feel this type of support, and this is amazing. Seriously, Rhiannon, it's great. And I want to say again, many people are involved. And I want to mention, even before I moved to San Francisco, I knew that some folks were thinking about restarting the meetup. In particular, Brandon Weaver, he mentioned it. Then there were some turbulence. I think he got a new job and he was super busy with that. And then when I moved, I decided let's try to run this meetup once. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how it's going to go. And I've never organized anything like that before. I didn't know what I was doing. And it just worked out. I remember that first one was at GitHub headquarters. It was amazing to be there at that venue. Also, there were around 100 people. I knew some of them. I didn't know other people. And we had amazing talks, amazing questions. You could tell the audience was connected, asking really cool questions. You could see that people are not just there for pizza. And then we had people, by the way, the second meetup, I remember, I think folks from New Relic just reached out and said, oh, can we host the next one? And this is how the next one happened. And then basically all the time, people reaching out and saying, hey, can we host? Of course, I'm also reaching out to a bunch of folks, but I feel that there is a pool from the Ruby community in San Francisco to actually be together, to re-engage with each other, to kind of meet old friends, make new friends, learn from each other. And we are very fortunate, of course, privileged. In San Francisco, we have all those Ruby companies headquarters that are willing to host us. I know it's of course much harder in different other places, but it's also coming to life. For example, next time our meetup is at Chime headquarters, and at the same day there is a meetup in Chicago, also in Chime as office.
Wow.
So we're doing this kind of double meetups in San Francisco and Chicago. And of course, in New York, Gusto's hosted at least once. So what I'm trying to say, yes, at least in those big cities where we have Ruby companies and Rubyists, the talent, we should just tap into it. And it was pretty easy to organize. It was also something for me to do after I moved to a new place. I needed to do something in some sense. That was beneficial for everybody.
It's really been incredible to see the journey, especially knowing that you've never hosted an event like that before and just having 100 people come out for the first one. You've been building so much momentum since then. And as someone who has the privilege of living here, it's great to every month be able to look forward to a gathering where we can see so many Ruby friends. And it's more than just an educational or professional meetup. It is a pillar of my life now that I look forward to. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, exactly, right? It plays the same role for me personally and for a bunch of people. And I think it works because people reach out, people say, hey, I want to speak. They fill out our CFP or they propose that their company would host. So there's this pool of people wanting it. And I think we all, for example, a special moment for me was when Jeremy Evans came to speak at our meetup. And at Evil Martians, we always recommend his book to mid-level Ruby engineers looking to upskill. And it was so special. It was like meeting a legend and learning his approach to software engineering, which is very different. I think he's one of those people that are really looking for quality and, of course, kind of 100% test coverage and stuff like that. Just some practices that we don't hear about them very often, because what we hear about very often is kind of pushing code to production as fast as we can, moving as fast as we can, which is also important. But I think this being able to see those people like Jeremy, not only at those large events, but also right here at the local event, it kind of inspires our growth, inspires us to do things differently.
I actually had the opportunity to meet Jeremy at Ruby Kaiki a month or two ago in Matsuyama, and I think we were all at a bar, and I was like, "Hi, what's your name?" He's like, "Jeremy," and I'm like, "Okay, cool. Is this your first Ruby Kaigi?" And he just starts laughing. I'm like, "Okay, my bad."
Yeah, yeah.
But it was really funny. He's so lovely. I'm sure I've probably run into him at one of your events and didn't realize, but he's such a wonderful guy. And it is so great to be able to have that here in San Francisco and to have folks fly from all over. I know Obi was one of your last speakers who flew in from Mexico City. Corey down in LA was at one of the recent ones too, came up for the night. And for this to now be turning into a conference at one of the most historic places in San Francisco, Fort Mason, I'm beyond excited.
Yeah, 100%. Folks, you got to come over. It's going to be great. I think it's a perfect chance to not only visit San Francisco and take in all this energy of this very much alive tech community here, Ruby community, but also, yeah, just enjoy San Francisco. The conference is going to be at this great venue. It's not in downtown. It's one of my favorite areas.
Much better than downtown.
You take a 10-minute walk and you're walking in a beautiful place, looking at the Golden Gate Bridge.
It is
The,
really
the,
cool. My dad's first time visiting us in San Francisco, we took him to Fort Mason because it's really one of those places that you want to see. You want to be there, surrounded by water and beautiful nature, the Golden Gate Bridge. And there's so much historical significance too. If someone has an interest in military history or World War II, it is just such a cool space to be in.
yeah, definitely. And it has character, right? It's not one of those conference venues where, especially if you go to conferences a lot, you grow tired of the typical conference venues. Although many of them are, of course, also in some sense historic, but there's something about being in a historical place like Fort Mason.
Yeah.
The last time I was there, it was San Francisco Art Week.
Oh, amazing.
So that venue was used for art exhibitions.
San Francisco is such a wonderful place, and I feel like over the last year or two, especially, there's been new energy and life in the city, and I think the same can be said for the Ruby ecosystem too. Everyone that I've been talking to has been saying this feels like a turning point where there's so much more interest and enthusiasm in the ecosystem and in the community, and we're seeing all of these events pop up all over the world. Ruby Central's had the privilege of being able to support some of these smaller local and regional events through grants. We recently, earlier this year, did a program for small events with Fastly as our partner, and SF Ruby was a recipient of one of those grants, and we may or may not have another round of those coming. And it is just great seeing like this truly global grassroots movement happening. This may be the last RailsConf this summer, but it is far from being the end of Ruby and Rails events. I do want to ask you a little bit about the final RailsConf. You were a keynote speaker last year at RailsConf Detroit, and now you're going to be speaking on a somewhat similar topic. I'd love to hear about what you're going to be speaking about and what inspired that and the significance of it for you.
Yeah, again, I 100% agree. There is this turning point for the Ruby community that we are experiencing right now. The last few years, it was pretty difficult to be a Ruby developer. And also for the companies, a lot of companies, they felt there is a lot of skepticism. So you can be criticized for using Ruby and this criticism would come in the form of, hey, is anybody even using Ruby anymore? And this was, okay, 2018, 19, 20th, especially at that time. And then I think from that low point, we started coming back, and now we're definitely back. There's definitely this turning point. And what I wanted to share at RailsConf last year is that all the new startups that are choosing Ruby, and that we just have the privilege of working with them at Evil Martians because we work with startups and we are very well known in the Ruby community. We see more startups on Ruby than other people, right? Just in the community. So last year, I just wanted to share the stories of those startups. So I went and talked to a bunch of them, to like 30 new startups. And what I discovered is, yes, they choose Ruby despite the skepticism. So imagine you choose Ruby for a new company in 2021 and 2022, while everybody is basically moved on and now deciding which JavaScript framework they're going to use for 6 months, and then they have to switch to something new because there's a new cool kid in town. But what about people that just want to enjoy software engineering? They love Ruby. It's really a joy, building with Ruby. And Rails is a superpower. It just gives you all this stuff out of the box that other people have to essentially glue together. And if you see those tweets where people say, hey, this is my startup stack, and they start listing all the third-party tools, mostly paid tools, that they have to glue together in their typically JavaScript stack, just to have what Rails provides out of the box, essentially. So instead of running around choosing those tools, maybe we should just focus on building the core, building what's different in our product versus everything else, right? So this is what I found out. This is what I heard people saying. I also heard them saying, look, so this feels great, but there are things that are missing. And I wanted to collect those things, analyze them, and share them with the community so that kind of be the voice of startups. Because here's the thing, a huge number of companies are built with Ruby and Rails. And there are all sorts of companies. There are small bootstrapped businesses, kind of one person businesses, one or two persons. There are huge companies like Shopify and GitHub and Cisco Meraki that has whatever, several millions of lines of code in their Rails app. Of course, the stack they use and those two different extremes, it's different naturally. It's different tasks, it's different focus. And then startups, so the types of companies that we work with and the types of companies you obviously see all around us here in San Francisco Bay Area, they are neither this nor that. They are small, ambitious, growing. They have to be super competitive on the market, super competitive, right? Because they go after certain large established companies in their markets. So they cannot just say, look, sometimes they can say we can simplify things, sometimes they cannot, right? It depends. Sometimes they have to compete with, for example, complex UI, super interactive user experience and stuff like that. So they are different. And I wanted to be the voice of those companies, of those types of companies that played a super big role in Rails historically. And I'll make a little note here about Y Combinator. So one of the SFRB meetups was at Y Combinator, and their partner, Jared, shared this story that I heard for the first time from firsthand experience. The story was that when Rails came out, and this was around the same time that Y Combinator was founded, and in the first few batches of YC, Rails was in 90% of the startups. And then what happened is, in a particular one, Heroku. Heroku was acquired by Salesforce very early on. And that was a very successful exit for YC. And not only Heroku was built on Rails, it was also built for Rails companies. It was a cloud for Rails, for your Rails application. The money YC got from that exit financed Y Combinator for many years after that. That was the first big exit and the first big success story. And this is how big of a role Rails played back then. And that's why partners at YC get Rails. They understand. Many of them have personal connection to it, which is great, which is not being shared a lot publicly because I'm not trying to say that Rails is as popular today. It's not. It's today it's less popular, of course. And we have a bunch of YC startups are a lot of them are built in JS stack today. But still, if you choose Ruby, and we see startups choosing Ruby and choosing Rails, YC partners will understand that and will get that, and they will, I would say, even be nostalgic maybe about that. For example, they recently published a vibe coding playbook, and he mentions Rails. He says, look, I'm actually vibe coding a Rails application, and they have more success with that versus some my peers building a JavaScript application because there are conventions, and the code that I'm generating with AI is much more clear, understandable, not only to me, but also for AI to keep building because there are conventions, right? Because we know where to put things, at least for new applications. Don't get me wrong, when you grow huge, as I don't know, Cisco or somebody else, Chime, growing on Rails, of course, requires a lot of special work and special attitude. But definitely for startups, Rails works great. And there was a lot of skepticism that I think we managed to overcome because people love Ruby and they started bringing it back. They started saying, look, we can actually build so much, so fast. Look at us. So how many Ruby meetups we had in the last 12 months around the world? I asked Marco Roth to look it up on rubyconferences.org, which he's maintaining. And he said it's over 9 meetups around the world. Just ask yourself how many, even if you think how many React meetups happened around the world, I'm not sure they had as many, to be honest. So I think Ruby is doing something, we're onto something because we have a real community. I think it's also a superpower of Ruby and Rails that we have a real community. It's not just people using a programming language. It's people that trust each other, that are willing to do things together, and they're willing to learn from each other, willing to help each other, support each other. So this is the power of community. And I think we managed to really inspire each other, support each other towards being more loud and being much more vocal about Ruby and overcoming this skepticism. And again, sorry, I maybe went too far, but basically my talk at RailsConf was previously, last year, the keynote was about startups, right? About bringing their voice so that we would have maybe not the same story as we had in the early YC days, but new stories about startups, right? New, they're going to be different. We already see a bunch of companies that are growing like crazy on Rails. And one good example is Bolt.new. The company was around for 4 years now. They launched a new product. It's AI code generation. They launched it in September and they went from 0 to 40 million ARR in revenue in 4 months,
Wow.
maybe 5 months. And their backend is Rails, and we've been working with them on that. It's great to see. Obviously, Rails is a superpower for enabling their growth, 100%. So for this RailsConf, I will go a little bit deeper. I will touch on the history a bit more because I want to bring stories like the one I just told you about YC. Yeah, more of them. Maybe some of them are going to be bittersweet, by the way. I really want to go and find out about what happened at Twitter.
That's a loaded topic for sure.
Yeah, I know
That's important.
that's important. I want to figure out different views, different opinions to understand. And again, I think it's natural that when something is hyped, and Rails was hyped in 2012, it was hyped. Let's admit it. Seriously, when people say it's a default choice and I choose it without thinking about it, this is when you know it's hype. Because everybody should make rational decisions, pragmatic decisions, right? They should choose technology not based on whatever other people are choosing, right? Or whatever's in fashion, but based on what's best for the job. But it's natural that there are going to be some flops and, yeah, sad stories where people choose something because of this hype and then they say it doesn't really work for us. Especially early on, it was still pretty early for Rails when Twitter moved off of it, because our expectations always go ahead of what the technology can offer at the moment, especially early on. Expectations inflate so quickly, and in reality, there's real work behind this technology. And this work was not only being done in the core Ruby, in the core Rails teams, but also the whole ecosystem. And I actually think this is the superpower of Rails, that there's this much innovation and, in some sense, competition inside the ecosystem. So we have alternative frameworks, obviously, Sinatra, Roda, many others. But even if we talk only about Rails, so originally, for example, we had competition, let's say, between databases, right? MySQL, Postgres, and Rails core preferred MySQL, the community, let's say 55 to 45 preferred Postgres, something like that. It was split. But you know what? Some people say, why don't we just have one solution for all? And I say, no, we don't want to. You want to have competition. You want to have different technologies, different, you could say, gems or kind of infrastructure components. Again, like any cable, in some sense, competing with action cable, right? It helps both. There's something about competition in open source that improves all the participants because, first of all, everybody can kind of copy over the ideas, right? That's why we built open source. We want people to reuse our ideas. We actually want those ideas to live on, right? Not the code. But there is something about Rails ecosystem where we have this competition and we are improving it. Many teams, not just the core teams, but of course, Evil Martians and Thoughtbot and just many people put a lot of effort and work into improving the whole ecosystem around Rails. And of course, it takes years, it takes decades. Something that you think now is the most performant kind of language, you think about Java or something like that, it was also not built in one day. So you need time. You actually need decades of production experience, production adoption, and adoption across different use cases, across different types of apps, different types of products and businesses and growth patterns to really learn what needs to be built. And I think in Rails, we are super fortunate that it's much easier to swap one gem to another versus imagine migrating to a different framework. And I'm speaking from experience because Evil Martians website was built on Gatsby. And Gatsby was something we wanted, this super snappy, prefetching, everything magical experience on the front end. And a few years back, Gatsby was the framework that would provide that. Now, how are we going to migrate off of that? It's a really big question. And it's a real pain. And of course, so many JavaScript frameworks already got popular and died in a few years. You don't know what to choose. You want to make a choice that is future proof, at least for the next 5 or 10 years. And Rails, I think, survived this original period of time when the technology can die. And now you can say, look, even if it's not hyped, even if people are skeptical, even if Jesus, even if nobody else uses it, I don't care. I'm going to be building with Ruby because this is what is making me productive. And I'm going to be building my next step with Rails. I'm not saying you have to use Rails for everything, by the way. No, be pragmatic. But I'm going to choose it because it is making me productive. It is making me successful. And knowing how many companies are investing in the ecosystem, I think we can now look ahead, look into the kind of new age of Ruby on Rails. Yes, maybe we will use alternative languages for certain things, for high performance parts of code and for infrastructure. We might use something else. It's fine. I think it's fine. We don't have to be dogmatic. But for normal SaaS application, there's nothing better. And there were many attempts to build something better. But the thing is, it's not about Rails per se. It's not about David's brilliant ideas, although he has them, of course. Hotwire is great, but again, Hotwire's ideas are based on stimulus reflex. That was around for a bunch of years, and a big number of people invested their time and their lives into it to prove that, yeah, this is actually a good idea. I'm trying to say community is more, and ecosystem is more than just the core of the technology and just the core of the framework. And really, this community is our superpower. This is something precious. And community is each of us and all the listeners who are brave enough to connect to other people, to support other people, to share with other people. Let's keep doing it, and we'll have amazing future ahead of us. And this final RailsConf is just a signal of this change, right? That yes, it's not about one organization running all the major events, essentially. It's about our trust that community is gonna come up with so many different events and forms of collaboration and engagement. And this is happening, and there's so many conferences. Of course, there's Rails World, Rails Foundation, there's EuroCore, there's Brighton Ruby, there's so many conferences in India, in Thailand, in Japan, but everywhere, in Brazil, seriously, everywhere. 900 meetups everywhere, maybe except what, like Antarctica? Anyway, and now we're going to have San Francisco Ruby Conference, which makes all the sense in the world. We're super privileged to be able to run it. And everybody should come over if you can come to San Francisco. You should come over and enjoy it with us. It's going to be great.
Absolutely agreed. And just for the record, I'm down for RubyConf Antarctica. Whoever wants to produce that, consider me in. But yes, you said it just so much of what you just said was so poignant. There's basically no one better positioned than you are right now to tell these stories and to bring these stories to the community because I think oftentimes in these conversations, with so much changing in the landscape with AI now, with just everything is moving so quickly, it's easy to get caught in the day to day and miss the big picture. Ruby on Rails has demonstrated this incredible staying power, and there's a reason that people love it so much, are so passionate about it, and are still building with Ruby and with Rails today after decades now. I think that's a really good point, and it's people like you who are hosting these events and driving it forward and doing this work and through the work you get to do with Evil Martians as well and all the startups that you interact with every day that are choosing Ruby and Rails. I'm really excited for your talk and to hear more of these stories because, yeah, if you're not here in San Francisco, it can be easy to miss all of the great stuff that's happening. Thank you for bringing this to us for the final RailsConf. And yeah, I'm just curious too, how did you get into the Ruby and Rails community? What was your story of finding the Evil Martians and becoming such a very important part of our community?
Yeah, if I can just mention, by the way, at the final RailsConf, we actually, from Evil Martians, we will have three talks. One is mine about startups and Rails in the past, present, and future. And the other one is from Sviatoslav Krukov. He's going to be telling the front-end story, which is very important. If you remember from my last year's keynote, the front-end story of Rails was the number one kind of demand to have a more kind of productive front-end story, not only Hotwire, but also with modern front-end stack. So that's why Svat actually started co-maintaining inertia.js. And also there's going to be a talk from Albert and Vladimir about the future of Rails starting in the browser. So they are bringing the Rails tutorial to the browser. So this means everybody learning Rails don't have to install anything. They can just start following the tutorial and build a Rails app in the browser using WASM, using web containers. So this is pretty amazing. This is something where we're trying to make Rails as simple to start building with as possible, right? My story is maybe typical. I don't know what's typical Ruby story. Nobody learns Ruby in university, in college. Although I know of a university, I think in Poland, that actually teaches Rails and even any cable. That's why I know
Oh,
about that.
interesting.
Yeah, any cable is part of the curriculum, and Rails is part of that curriculum. I regret not knowing about Rails when I was in college. I was getting a computer science degree, but I only knew C++ and .NET, assembler as well, but doesn't count. I wasn't inspired by this very corporate or enterprisey world of .NET. It felt kind of sluggish, heavy, hard to explain. I didn't want to go there. So I went somewhere else. I actually went to finance, and then I realized I don't like that either. And then I started a startup. And my first startup was it was an e-commerce using a WordPress plugin. It was PHP, it was awful. I didn't enjoy it at all. If anybody is using WordPress today, maybe it's slightly better, but it was pretty awful back in 2012. Yeah. And I didn't know about Rails back then. I learned about it in 2014. And around the time, maybe I heard about it, but this is when I was building my second startup here in California. In 2014, I was building my second startup, just playing with some ideas. And I was building it while learning Rails. I was building on Rails while learning Rails. Typical story. So I didn't learn Rails separately from building the startup. So it was just my first project was my startup. Yeah, it was so much fun. Of course, I was coming from the C+ background. I had to wrap my head around Ruby a little bit. I didn't learn the language separately. I just jumped into it. But it was great. I really loved it. I really loved how much I could do. I did that, and then I consulted. This startup didn't go anywhere, and then I had a consulting project. I did it on Rails and Spree Commerce. I had to build a bunch of stuff. I was planning to be a product manager there, but my engineer disappeared, and I was doing both jobs. So then I found Evil Martians. So the company is 18 years old. I joined about 8 years ago, and yeah, I became the CEO several years ago by replacing one of the co-founders. And I loved that Evil Martians were primarily building with Ruby on the backend side, especially because this is something I loved already. It just felt really natural. But I'm not an engineer myself. By the way, there's something important about the Ruby community that is very accepting. And I never felt like an imposter because of the fact that I'm not an engineer. I actually always felt very well supported and understood in the Ruby community. So again, we work with our backend team, and that is led by Vladimir Dmitriev. And he also never criticized me for asking many stupid questions or coming up with my own opinions. And I have opinions about the ecosystem. And even though, yes, I'm not an engineer myself right now, I maybe used to be, and I would never pass the backend interview to Evil Martians. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, because I was just building for myself mostly, so not the best engineering practices. But there's something about the Ruby community that is very kind of tuned to entrepreneurship, right? And many people are not software engineers by trade, but they are software engineers that are entrepreneurial, that are building their own products. And I always felt there's something great about that. I felt at home in the community of people like myself. The Ruby community is very accepting of different backgrounds, different types of people with different angles. And I love talking to people and learning a lot from them. For example, now we're building a lot of tooling for AI, and my role is more on the business side, more on understanding what needs to be done, what value people are looking for. But I think you need both. You need a very good kind of business side insight, and you need a very deep technological insight. And the best things come to life when you have both. And you don't have to worry that, oh, I'm not an engineer. People are going to laugh at me for speaking at conferences. Not at all. And that's not my experience.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and I think it really does reflect. Like, I've been doing these interviews now with Ruby Central speakers and folks in our ecosystem for the better part of the last 6 months, and it's something that I hear time and time again. People come to the Ruby community with often a non-traditional background, a background that just isn't a linear computer science to software engineering job pipeline. And are very welcomed here. I'm obviously not an engineer. I don't know if it's obvious or not, but I'm not an engineer. And I've always felt in my several years going to events and being part of this ecosystem very welcomed in a way that I wasn't expecting to be. And again, that speaks to the power of this community and why the language has had such staying power. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Thank you, Rhiannon.
So we'll wrap this up, but I do have one last question for you, Irina. Obviously, we have the final RailsConf coming up in 5 weeks now. It's really actually shockingly close. Other than your talk, which we're all looking forward to, what is it that you're looking forward to about this last RailsConf?
I think that this RailsConf is going to be incredibly special because it's going to be uniting so many people. I know so many people are going to come that maybe didn't attend the RailsConf recently. It's going to be the place where you can meet your old friends and the legends that you only heard about. And I'm excited about who I'm going to meet there. I'm excited about this idea that, okay, maybe it's our last party in this format, but it's going to be a hell of a party. So honestly, I'm looking forward to that. And of course, David being there, it's going to be kind of uniting different parts of the community. We found a way to collaborate to overcome some past sort of conflicts and stuff, and find a way to build further and to collaborate. We don't have to agree. We don't have to have the same opinion or the same vision. Luckily, we don't. Seriously, the more visions, the more different chances we have for success. Let's have people try different visions and different paths forward. And this is great. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to obviously all of the talks. Being able to learn a lot about the history of Rails for me is also important because I wasn't there for a lot of that, almost any of that, unfortunately. So I want to get connected and learn a lot about the history so that now we can take it and move it forward in all the different other formats that we as the community will come up with. And I think RailsConf is going to be the place where there are going to be conversations about the future. To be honest, I think I'm going to be in the hallway track most of the time. I just want to talk to the people. I want to have those conversations with people about what they think about the future, what we should help make happen, all the new ideas, all the new formats. I want that. And I hope everybody is coming. I know it's going to be legendary.
It
Um,
really will be. And thank you for touching on that piece about unity in the community and in the ecosystem, because personally, I agree that's so important. And I think that's part of what makes this last RailsConf very unique. It's a final send-off for this particular event, centered around celebrating the past 20 years that we collectively have been doing this. And appreciating all of the people who have made this possible and who have made Rails what it is today, and being able to come together, put aside past differences, and just focus on what the growth of this ecosystem and this framework that we all love, that many of us have built careers around, built companies around, is an incredible thing. We all want this framework to thrive. And I think, again, just speaking for myself personally, that really is such an important theme and part of this moment where we're saying goodbye to RailsConf, but really welcoming in this new era of energy, events, innovation, and looking to the future. So I can't wait.
Yeah, 100%. You could say it's almost as if, imagine you were a kid and the parties were hosted by your parents. And now this is the final party hosted by the parents. Now we're going to be hosting our own.
We're graduating. Ruby
Yeah.
Central is going to be an empty nester. No, we're still doing RubyConf.
No, RubyConf. RubyConf is going to be there. RubyConf
Yes.
is going to be there.
And RubyConf, we had a staff meeting at Ruby Central yesterday talking about new ideas for things we might want to do for the next RubyConf in the spring of 2026. I'm excited about the locations we're considering and
Amazing.
breathing fresh life into our events too, especially with our new executive director, Shan Kirtan, who recently joined. This is
Yeah,
the end of RailsConf, but it's not the last that you've seen of us, and it's not the end of the ecosystem for sure.
100%. I'm super excited about what the new executive is bringing the new energy. And just you all, for Ruby Central, running those two conferences, it was stretching the organization pretty thin. And it's great that focusing on just one conference is going to feel a lot more comfortable. By the way, I have no idea how you're running two conferences per year. Because again, running the meetup is one thing, but like running a real conference is just so much work.
Oh, yeah. I
Um,
will say we have an amazing event team that we work with, and they really do so much. But yeah, it is going to be nice to really focus in on one incredible annual event and bringing something fresh to the table once again.
that's pretty awesome. Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Irina. It was really fun talking to you. I think this is such a great conversation. I'm so excited for the community to get to listen in on this and just to be able to meet you if they haven't already at RailsConf in July and be part of that hallway track and for you to get to share more about what you're working on and the startups you've been working with.
100%. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this as well. But it's coming pretty quickly.
5 weeks. So it's coming down to the wire. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, we do have a couple tickets left, railsconf.org. And everyone also keep your eye on the SF Ruby conference, November 19th through 20th.
Yeah, CFP is going live in a few days. Please go to sfruby.com and sign up for our updates. So we're going to be sharing the CFP, ticket sales, everything there.
Absolutely.
See you there.
Thank you.